With us now, Julian Castro, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and an MSNBC political analyst, and former Florida Congresswoman Val Demings. So, Julian, it's great to see both of you. You were one of the first voices that kind of come out and call on the president to step aside. Has anything the president said or done since then made you reconsider?
No, Jose. I mean, I think it's true that both in the ABC interview and certainly in the press conference last night, Joe Biden showed, I think, some of why folks elected him in 2020, particularly on foreign policy, his ability to discuss politics and policy all over the world and to get into some good detail. But it also showed, I think, in both the interview and the press conference, that he's not really able to take the case to Donald Trump, not able to prosecute the case of 2024. On top of that, I think there's a continued concern that we don't know when that Joe Biden of the debate is going to reappear. I don't believe that that was an anomaly. I think that this is part of a pattern that we've seen to develop over the last year or so. And to me, the most concerning scenario is that we get to the convention, that Joe Biden is the nominee, and he's going to be the nominee if he wants to be. If he doesn't want to step out of the race, there's no way to make him step out of the race. He gets the nomination, and then we see the same kind of pattern from August until November. There's already a tremendous amount of concern that regular voters have, and they've been saying that in focus groups and in polling consistently. They have a real concern about his age and the question of whether he could serve another 4 years. That's not going to go away. That's a real political liability, and it's a liability that is very different from every other kind of political liability. And we're really going to be holding our breath if we nominate Joe Biden and go through that convention, and then there's no way really to make a change from August through November. Is it possible for him to win? Yes, it's possible for him to win. We live in a very polarized country where whether you're the Democratic nominee or the Republican nominee, you're going to be somewhere between the mid to high 40s. But the standard all along has been, who is the best Democrat to actually beat Donald Trump in 2024? And on that question, I think the answer is the same today as it was right after the debate, that there are folks who would do a better job and be more likely to beat Donald Trump in 2024 than Joe Biden.
Val, what do you see in Julian's logic? It's an A to Z logic.
Well, Jose, it's great to be with you. And let me just say this. There are three people who could be the next president of the United States. Donald John Trump, who has been found liable for sexual assault, stole classified documents, I'm sure, for personal gain, multiple indictments, multiple felony convictions. There's Joe Biden, who has proven every day that he can do the job by doing the job every day. And, you know, to say that, well, my God, what will happen in 3 or 4 years? Well, we don't know with any elected official what they would do in office in 3 or 4 years. The third possibility is Vice President Harris. And I truly believe that Vice President Harris is capable of leading us to the next level and also carrying on Joe Biden's legacy. Jose, what I am disappointed about are the Democrats who have come out against the president and saying that they don't believe that he can win when we don't know which Democratic potential candidate can win. And until we have our strategy together, a winning strategy, until we have a plan B, that we have the polling and other factors that will help us believe that they have a better chance of winning than Joe Biden, I think that it would be wise for Democrats to stay in that back room, continue to have those discussions. Let's get our plan B together, especially the 17 who have come out against Joe Biden. You know, I think it's interesting. 17 out of what? Or 17 out of 213 people in the House, 47 senators, 4 independents, and 1 who have come out in the Senate. That would be a pretty interesting story, that they have not come out against the president. But I think it is important to be unified. We don't have the time not to be, or the luxury to not be unified.
So, Val, this is all so important. We're in July 12th. We're not in June. We're not in April. we've got the Republican convention coming up next week. The Democrats have theirs coming up next month. But it's not like the president went through a primary season where he got the delegates necessary, times 100. Isn't it a little bit late to be having this discussion that you're mentioning maybe could be?
I think the 18 or so elected officials who have come out against President Biden, I think it's also very interesting that they have not given any options of who the plan B would be. And I believe the only option is Vice President Harris. And for the exact reason, Jose, that you just mentioned, we're running against the clock. But number two, she is fully capable of carrying out President Biden's legacy and getting it done, protecting our democracy. And so I just think
she should be on the ticket right now, top of the ticket, Val?
We need to get this done. I'm sorry?
Are you saying that you think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, are you saying you think that she should be at the top of the ticket now?
I am not saying that. I think that President Biden should not get out of this race. But what I am saying is that if he decides that he wants to, wouldn't it be nice if the Democrats who are saying he should get out would say, and we have a viable plan B, and that person is Vice President Harris. I've heard other names. Jose, that's not going to happen. We don't have the time for that. And if it did happen, if we went searching for another candidate other than the vice president, that is going to be total chaos. And I really do believe that we would be guaranteed to lose. The stakes are too high. We need to stay focused and be strategic.
And Julian, you were saying that your view of the president's handling has changed in the past year. Is this something, Julian, you think that maybe has been kept hidden from people? I mean, it's not like he's been doing anything differently.
No, I mean, I think this is a natural part of aging that we've seen our parents go through, our grandparents. I mean, you see this all the time. What I'm saying is that it's become more and more noticeable. There seems to be an acceleration of it, as many have commented, over the last 6 months, over the last year. And I anticipate, because this is the way things work, naturally, that's going to continue and may even accelerate more. The goalposts have been shifted here, though, Jose. I want to make this point. Joe Biden was elected in 2020 because people felt as though he was the strongest. He was elected as the Democratic nominee. People thought he was the strongest candidate to beat Donald Trump, and he did beat Donald Trump. Now we need to make sure that we're putting forth the strongest candidate to beat Donald Trump in 2024, and I do not believe that is Joe Biden.
Julian Castro and Val Demings, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.